Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're joining us. My name is Cheryl Brown, and I'm a program advisor for the San Diego and Imperial Valley SBDC network. We provide no-cost services to the small business community, and my primary area of advising is government contracting and doing business or trying to do business with large corporations. So today, we're going to go over some real basic tips and tricks and how to create an elevator pitch. So what is an elevator pitch, first and foremost? Well, think of it as like your 7 seconds of fame. Now, it's a very small, short, brief introduction. You really want to keep it short and sweet and simple. Now, the definition here says 30 seconds, when in actuality, studies have shown that people develop a first impression within the first 7 seconds. So you really don't even have 30 seconds to make this first impression. And really what you're trying to do is just simply get the dialogue going. Here's the facts. If you want to generate revenue, if you want to increase revenue, there is only one way to do that, and that's through marketing. Literally, there is no other way to generate revenue or sales without marketing. And marketing starts off with that good first impression. There's 3 levels to marketing that we often fail to recognize. Obviously, number one reason or the number one outcome for marketing is revenues. That's what we want our marketing dollars to do. But before that happens, there's 2 very important key things that have to occur with the person that you're hoping buys your product or service. Now, I'm always referring to the person, even if you're dealing with a B2B, business to business, or a B2G, business to government transaction, because ultimately it is the person that is making the decision as to whether they buy from you or your competitor. So before revenues can actually be generated, you have to have 2 things. Number one, name recognition. They have to recognize your name. See, I'm sure that a lot of customers would love to buy from you, but the one reason why they can't at this point is because they don't even know you exist. So we need to create name recognition. The second thing we have to do is we need to create an open dialogue. This is often referred to as creating rapport or developing rapport, creating some sort of open dialogue. Those 2 things have to happen before revenues can be generated. And the key to marketing success is follow up, follow up, follow up, follow up, follow up. And this is the elevator pitch is the first step in this marketing process. I want you to understand that that first meeting, that first introduction is not about getting sales at that time or generating revenue. The whole objective of that first meeting is to actually get the first date. Think about it kind of like in dating. The first meeting is supposed to get the first date. Ideally, the first date then leads to the second date, and then down the road, if all goes well, marriage. So this first meeting, this elevator pitch, if you will, in business is like the dating world. That introduction is simply to get the first date, not get married. This introduction this elevator pitch is the first step in getting an actual meeting. As you do with anything else, preparing is important. So verbally, you want to just write it all down so that it's right there, easy for you to grab. Your name, your company's name, your general services or products. I recommend you get 3. Like if you have a lot of things that you're able to provide, focus in on the first 3. Remember, this is the first meeting, not the first date or the second date or the marriage. This is simply the first meeting. You want to try and reference to a past project or something, or a project that maybe you're working on that you're really excited about. And then open-ended questions. Remember, we need to create that open dialogue. That's only the verbal part. Of course, now you also have the non-verbal. First of all, early is on time is late. So always try to be a little bit early when you're going to a networking event, or in this day and age, a Zoom event. Early is on time is late. If you're meeting over Zoom or any other sort of electronic device, be sure to check your video and your audio before getting on. First impressions last a lifetime. And make sure that you're dressing the part. Again, in this day and age with the Zoom and the technology, I mean, even if it's just from the waist up, we're good. But you want to make sure that you're being put together. Things like tone of voice, eye contact, being engaged, trying to eliminate distractions, like turn off your cell phones, close your door, tell the kids that you're busy for 5 minutes, and really try to stay focused. More is being absorbed from your recipient with your nonverbal cues and tone of voice. So make sure that you're aware of those. So what does this look like? Very, very simple. My name is Susan Smith, founder of SNS Engineering. SNS Engineering is a CSLB licensed civil engineering firm. SNS specializes in bridges, tunnels, and overhead passes. This year, SNS Engineering designed and managed the SR-99 project for Caltrans in Oceanside, California. SNS Engineering is certified as a DBE number 47869 and SB number 74859. What is big prime company currently doing in the areas of procuring or outsourcing civil engineering services? Then keep quiet. You're going to notice a couple things here. One, I kept on saying the name SNS Engineering, SNS Engineering, SNS Engineering. The reason for that, and there is a reason, is you remember the number one piece of marketing? Name recognition. So that's by repeating the name of the company over again a few different times, it starts to resonate with some name recognition. And then we end this pitch with an open-ended question. This is to help promote that dialogue, which then in turns will promote rapport. Again, this is the initial meeting. We don't want to tell them everything about us, but just enough to say, hey, let's move this conversation or move this forward the next step, which in another training we'll be talking about the actual sales pitch or marketing pitch that you will be conducting when you're doing an actual meeting. But this again is just the elevator pitch. Another example we have here, my name is Joe Maloney, Business Development Representative for All Things Metal. All Things Metal is a supplier, All Things Metal is supplied, All Things Metals are certified, and then the open-ended question. What are kind of big company prime doing in the areas of procuring? Keeping that open dialogue, that open-ended question, and then most importantly, listen when you get that response. A couple of examples of questions that you can ask to move that forward. First one is going to be, what questions can I answer for you? So if you're doing an introduction, like an elevator pitch with a group of people, or in like an environment like a networking event, you can simply just ask, what questions can I answer for you? Try to refrain from yes and no questions, because yes and no questions do not prompt a dialogue. So some really good examples of questions to ask is, what are you currently doing in the areas of purchasing your service? What are your minimum requirements in order to be eligible for opportunities with ABC Large Corporation? What is your procurement process? What would my company need to do to be eligible for opportunities? And so having these questions kind of prepared will allow you to then flow with those Q&A components. Again, ask the open questions so that you can create that dialogue. Think about this. Marketing is about educating, inspiring, and being a resource. It's never about selling. So what you want to try to do is you want to then drive the marketing bus, where you're creating dialogue, you're educating, you're inspiring, you're being a resource, and let your customer then drive the sales bus. And that would be to start asking you questions such as, how much does this cost? Or what are you able to do? So there's two components. See, you can have marketing without sales. We call that bad marketing. but you cannot have a sale without marketing. So if you're feeling uncomfortable about, sales calls, I want you to start thinking it more in the lines of marketing calls. You're not selling anything. You're simply educating, inspiring, and being a resource for your customer. So some tips. First of all, memorize your pitch. It's only 4 or 5 sentences. Memorize it, memorize it, memorize it. So every time you say your pitch or you present your pitch, it's basically exactly the same. And you'll find that you're putting your inflections of your voice will go up and down and basically at the same exact point. When you've memorized your pitch, now this is a tough one, take your camera phone or your computer phone or whatever, your camera, and record you doing your pitch. You may even get to a point where you put your phone somewhere in the room and you enter the room and record yourself as you enter the room and you approach the camera. In this case, you're pretend like the camera's your customer and record. When you're able to rewatch that recording without cringing, you've nailed it. A lot of times, we don't even realize that our body language might be being hostile or aggressive until we actually see it happen. So recording yourself and then rewatching is a really great way to practice on your own so that you can really have your elevator pitch be clear and succinct. Focus on creating that open dialogue. Again, we've got the name recognition, we're building rapport. That's the key to the next step, to that first date, if you will. Make sure you are prepared for their questions. If you don't know, if they ask a question and you don't know the answer, don't lie to them. Don't make it up. Just let them know, hey, that's a really great question. Let me get back to you. This is a great opportunity for you to just follow up with them. Maybe you do know the answer, but you're going to utilize this strategy or this technique to create a follow-up. So there's another way to always be prepared for those questions and be prepared to say, hey, I don't know, and follow up. You got to be patient. Marketing doesn't happen overnight. I mean, some does, especially when you're dealing with the consumer-based market, so your B2C market. But for the most part, when you're dealing with large corporations, commercial accounts, government entities, this is not a one and done situation. It's going to take at least 6 or 7 or 8 follow-ups to actually create that rapport and generate revenue. Don't sell, and you know what? Just be nice. I know that's kind of a funny thing to say, but honestly, be nice, be genuine, be who you are. This quote that I have here is actually a true quote that was received from one of our state agency buyers, a contract administrator that was dealing with one of the small businesses. And they literally said, you know what? You know why we always call you? It's because you're always nice and you don't yell at us. I know. You can't believe that happens, but it does. So remember, these are people. Nobody likes to be sold to. Your goal in this elevator pitch is to simply get a first date. Create an open dialogue, get the name recognition, and be patient. You can always send me your questions, concerns. You've got my email right there, centerinfo@miracosta.edu. But I look forward to seeing your pitches and your elevator pitch. Have a great evening and good luck.